Did you know that addiction comes from childhood trauma and not genetics? Yeah, I was surprised too because I come from childhood trauma and I come from a family with a lot of addictions, alcoholism, workaholics, sex addictions, all kinds of, emotional abuse addictions, like all kinds of addictions. And and I was really shocked and pleasantly surprised that there's a solution to this challenge. So I'm Carrie Blazer, reincarnation of Mary Magdalene, the Divine Feminine. Today I want to do a deep dive into addiction, and we're going to look at a video from Dr. Gabor Mate. He is a family medicine practitioner who specializes in how childhood trauma impacts adults. So this is like, he's perfect for us to go into a deep dive into the origins of addiction in the childhood. And then we could talk about how to recover. And we're going to use Albert Einstein too. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Okay, we'll get back to that quote in a little bit, but let's start with Dr. Gabor Mate and learn about the true origins of addiction, and then we'll talk about how to solve that. And I love this after school. It's so like the art is just wonderful. And so we're going to hear Dr. Gabor Mate's voice, and after school will illustrate it for us so that we can, see and hear, understand in multiple levels.
So an addiction is a complex psychological, physiological process, but which manifests in any behavior that a person enjoys, finds relief in, and therefore craves in the short term, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and doesn't give up despite the negative consequences. So craving pleasure, relief in the short term, negative consequences in the long term, inability to give it up. No.
That is a lack of self-control. That's a dopamine addiction. It's just dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. And because the body is not running in a healthy way. So let's find out why.
Site has said nothing about substances. I said any behavior. So it could be related to cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, whatever. Could also be sex, gambling, internet, relationships, shopping, eating, work, extreme sports, working out, pornography, any number of human activities. So I said any behavior. Now, the official definition of addiction, according to the American Society for Addiction Medicine, is that this is it's a primary brain disorder. It arises in the brain, largely due to genetic reasons. This is how they see it. And I say that's just not true. The other popular idea about addiction is that it's a choice that somebody makes, that people choose to be addicted, which is what the legal system is based on. Because if people are not choosing, what are we punishing them for?
That's an excellent question. We'll get to that second. Let's start with that addiction is not a primary brain disorder that arises largely due to genetic reasons. That is not it. The field of epigenetics, epi meaning before genetics, which is just all throughout medical science now, that's how they develop vaccines, says that less than 1% of our diseases come from our genetics. So where do they come from? Here's the Einstein quote. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field, meaning the energy field. Physicists have proven that we all have energy fields or souls. So that energy field is controlling the body. Okay, so where is the disorder? In the energy field due to childhood trauma. We'll get to there in a second. And so this whole, we're going to punish someone because they had childhood trauma and they don't know how to deal with it. Well, we're having a current mental health crisis and all of us don't know how to deal with it. This is why in other countries where they focus on rehab have a far diminished recidivism rate, like reoccurrence of the crime rate, than we do here in America, because we don't solve the issue. We punish as if self-control comes from the outside. But where does self-control come from? It comes from the inside, from a regulated nervous system. And we're going to get into how to regulate, how to recalibrate your nervous system. Because this guy here in the yellow, his nervous system is calibrated for fear, guilt, and shame, lack of self-control. How do we gain self-control? We turn those wounds into wisdom, understand ourselves, understand where we're insecure, where we don't believe in ourselves. Like I had wounds that I'm replaceable. I'm the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. Like no one is replaceable, right? But I hated myself so much that I believed that I was replaceable because of my childhood trauma. So let's keep learning about how this really works.
And although I think the medical definition is closer to the truth, I don't see it as genetic. It's a genetic disorder, and I don't see it as a primary brain disorder. So let me perhaps show you why, if that's okay. A human being has two fundamental needs, apart from the physical needs in infancy, in childhood. One is for attachment. Now, attachment is the closeness and proximity with another human being for the sake of being looked after, or for the sake of looking after the other. Now, human beings, as mammals and even birds, are creatures of attachment. We have to connect and attach because otherwise we don't survive. If there's nobody that's motivated to take care of us, to attach to us that way, and we're not motivated to attach to others, we just can't survive. One interesting thing is that the endorphins, which are the body's internal opiate chemicals, which heroin and all the other opiates resemble, they help to facilitate attachment. So if you take infant mice and you knock out their endorphin receptors so they don't have endorphin opiate activity in their brain, they won't cry for help and separate from their mothers, which would mean that they would die in the wild. And which goes back to what happens early in childhood when there's stress and trauma, these endorphin systems don't develop. And then when people do heroin, it feels like a warm, soft hug to them. They feel love and connection for the first time. That's why it's so powerful.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing that we create endorphins to facilitate attachment. And that, like in my childhood, I was just told to be quiet, like, don't talk, Carrie. Like, I'm very intuitive and I'm very direct and I'm very perceptive and smart. So I'd put pieces together at a young age and just say it. Well, that just wasn't acceptable. My mom was an alcoholic. She used fear, guilt, and shame to control people. You should, and it's just. My dad was a workaholic. He just avoided and wasn't at home. So this is incredible that, the field, because the field informs the body. So when I feel hungry, my mouth salivates, right? But when there's stress and trauma in the energy field, then the particle is negatively impacted and endorphin systems don't develop. The brain is underdeveloped. What I just learned today, that you stay young by using your brain in healthy ways and being active. And that's how you stay young. So wow. Yeah, that was me. That was me.
But so we have this need for attachment, without which obviously the human infant, who's the most helpless, the most dependent, the least mature of any creature in the universe at birth, cannot survive without the attachment. And that attachment relationship, given that we have the longest period of development of any creature, well into adolescence and beyond, attachment is not a negotiable need. But we have another need, which is authenticity. Now, authenticity, outward of self, means being connected to ourselves. Just knowing what we feel and being able to act on it.
What he's talking about is the Carl Jung concept of individuation, which this is why I love Dr. Gabor Mate, because he's completely in alignment with Carl Jung. And that when, like in my childhood, I was constantly being punished and controlled for being myself. So I had to reject huge parts of myself just to be at home and attached and not get, punished and more abused. And I realized that if I asked for help, I just got more punishment. So don't ask for help. So you like the mouse not crying in the wild, like that was me. Like, don't ask for help because that's more punishment. And, my endorphin system was not completely developed because of my childhood trauma. And so these people can't individuate, can't mature into healthy adults because they're so busy rejecting parts of themselves and then dealing with the pain that that causes. I had 35 years of debilitating lower back pain. 35 years of my womb screaming at me to heal from my childhood trauma, but I didn't know how to listen. I did not know how to be authentic to myself because, I had that problem, lots of failed relationships. I had to be in control because I was so afraid of men. So I had to be in control, but that is not a healthy woman. So let's keep learning about authenticity and individuation, because when there's a healthy parent-child relationship, the child naturally individuates and becomes a mature, grown adult. But when the child can't individuate and can't express itself and is so busy repressing itself, that's the internal system and their energy field, their soul that they engage in. And then that calibrates their nervous system and their hearts to resonate with fear, guilt, and shame instead of love, compassion, and enlightenment, which is a healthy, mature human being with a full range of emotions. But when you're just repressed and all you got is fear, guilt, and shame, or being quiet, and that's all you got, then your emotional range is minute and you're not a healthy, mature human being.
So that means our gut feelings. So let's look at how human beings evolved. For hundreds of thousands of years, and for 100,000 years or so of this species existing on Earth, how did we live? We didn't live in cities and houses and so on. We lived out there in the wild until very recently in human existence. Now, just how long do you survive in the wild if you're not connected to your gut feelings? Not very long. If you start using your intellect instead of your gut feelings, you just don't survive. So that's a powerful survival need as well. So attachment is a survival need. Authenticity is a survival need. But what happens if your authenticity threatens your attachment relationships? For example, as a 2-year-old, you get angry because you didn't get that cookie before dinner. But your parents can't handle anger because they grew up in homes when there was rageaholicism and they're terrified at the very expression of anger. So they give you the message that good little kids don't get angry. The message you receive is not that good little kids don't get angry, but that angry little kids don't get loved because your parents
Let's
are now
sit on that for a second. The mother is communicating good kids don't get angry. And what the child internalizes is angry kids don't get loved. Okay, reject anger. Because if the child's not being loved, the child's not being taken care of. And, I didn't realize that when I had kids. I only healed over the past 10 years, and my kids were teenagers when I started healing. And now they're in their 20s. So this definitely happened in my household.
one, they won't look at you, they talk to you in a harsh way, you're not getting loved. Not experiencing love at that moment. No. But you got to stay attached. Guess what you're going to suppress? The authenticity every time. And this is how we lose connection to ourselves and to our gut feelings. So that, strangely enough, that very dynamic, which is essential for human survival in a natural setting, now becomes a threat to our survival in this more modern setting, where to stay authentic is to threaten attachment. And so we give up our authenticity, and then we wonder who the hell we are, and whose life is this, and who's experiencing all this, and this life doesn't, and who am I
I'm going
really?
to quote Carl
And so
Jung here, who he completely aligns with. One does not feel loneliness because one has no one about them. One feels loneliness because one is unable to communicate what's important to them. They can't share themselves. I mean, now I'm sharing myself left, right, and center, but I can't share myself. Like in my dad's house. So 2.5 years ago on my birthday, I went down there and I took a boat ride because they live on a lake. They're rich. Talked with my dad and my stepmom. My stepmom, who was a therapist, started complaining that her sister was just born like without any common sense. And she was like in her 70s. And she knows I'm a healer, like that I deal with the soul, like souls, all of our souls are equally capable. So no soul is born without any common sense. And so I tried to help her self-reflect because she's projecting her self-hate onto her sister. And there I'm trying to have a good time on my birthday. But okay, I'll help you. Well, it didn't go well. And she wanted an unconditional apology with no conversation. So I couldn't be authentic. I just had to bow down. I just had to conform. Right? You see what I'm talking about? I couldn't be an individual, like say, well, why weren't you nice to me on my birthday? But that was the trigger. Then I went off on text about how she's projecting her self-hate on me for 40 years, how I'm done with it, how I understand that as the mother in the family, she's the emotional center where mental health is created and sustained. So I asked her, why do we have so many mentally ill people in our family? And she's a therapist. If you don't know what we're doing in terms of healing trauma, we just don't. But we're going to get into it. I have that free ebook below and we're going to talk about it. I'll bring it up after.
That's where the reconnection has to happen. That's where the healing
So the
happens.
reconnection, it just flooded me that nature therapy is scientifically proven to help people more than like depression drugs like SSRIs. Okay. Nature therapy. Why? Because you can let go. You can open your heart. You can be an individual. You can be authentic. You can enjoy yourself. I mean, there's old shamanic wisdom says that, you know, when someone's anxious or depressed, they ask, when's the last time you danced? When's the last time you felt joy? When's the last time you sang? Recalibrate the nervous system for love, joy, and enlightenment instead of fear, guilt, and shame. When you spend time in those emotions, naturally, then that's the recalibration process.
But it's because of that conflict, the tragic conflict in childhood between authenticity and attachment that most of us face, that we lose ourselves and lose connection to our gut feelings. Now, this leads to the question of trauma, because it's one thing to recognize that all this originates in childhood pain. It's quite another to transform that pain. And for that, we have to understand what trauma is. So people often think that trauma is what happens to you. So trauma is a divorce when you were small and your parents fighting. Trauma is your mother's depression. Trauma is your father's alcoholism. Trauma is your parents' argumentation. Trauma is physical or sexual abuse or some loss. Those aren't the traumas. Those are traumatic. But the trauma is not what happens to you. The trauma is what happens inside you.
It's how you internalize it. Like we saw between the mother and the child, right? The mother's communicating, good kids don't get angry, and the child internalized, if I'm angry, I don't get loved. And she needs love as a 2-year-old, so she represses the anger and does what her mom wants. She conforms. So, and what we internalize is up to our souls, up to our energy field. I mean, I could call 10 people stupid, and they're all going to react differently, all based on their energy field, their soul. The field is a soul governing agency of the particle. You know, like, so let's keep going. But this is definitely because people can have traumatic experiences, but if they can process those emotions on the inside, then they let go. Like there's another video I have from Dr. Gabor Mate, where he talks about how they did studies that if you send 100 people into battle, 100 men into battle, only 20 of them will come out with PTSD, 20%. Why? Because the 80% learned how to process their emotions in childhood. So yeah, it's going to hurt and it's going to be challenging, but it's not going to lead to another episode of addiction. Where with the people who did not learn how to process their emotions, like me, I internalized all of their self-hate, then I don't know how to process my emotions. So a lot depends on our childhood. It really sets us up for a lot of pain or not as much pain.
And as a result of these traumatic events, what happens inside you is you get disconnected from your emotions and you disconnected from your body, and you have difficulty being in the present moment, and you develop a negative view of your world and a negative view of yourself and a defensive view of other people. And these perspectives keep showing up in your life in the present. So in other words, the addiction is not the primary problem. It's an attempt to solve a problem. And then the real question is, how did the problem arise? In other words, this is where my theory is that it's always rooted in childhood trauma, and that the addiction is an attempt to deal with the effects of childhood trauma, which it does temporarily, while it creates even more problems in the long term. And so the issue is not just to recognize what happened 10, 15, 30, however many years ago, but to actually recognize the manifestations in the present moment and to transcend them. And how do you do that? By reconnecting with yourself, by restoring the connection with your body primarily and with your emotions
So
that
I'm
you
going to go ahead
lost.
and stop it here. I'll link it below so you can all see it. Oh, whoops, I didn't. Okay, there we go. So that brings me to my free ebook below, which is the 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies. How to love yourself, how to love your anger, how to love your fear, how to interact with your fear. And that's something I was not taught in my childhood. And I'm going to bring up another presentation that I do, and I'm going to talk more about why recalibrating your nervous system is really the way to that's the healing process. Okay, that is the healing process. And so and I have a video I can share about how this all works. Okay. Oh, I went one too far. Okay, let's start here. So let me share my screen, and then we're going to talk about how the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. How does that happen in the body? The connection between, we say heart and soul, right? Because the soul communicates out through the heart. Our energy fields come out through the heart. So let's start here, and we'll watch a video because it gets a lot more into what the heart does and why it's so important why recalibrating the heart into coherence is the process of healing from our childhood trauma. We're going to get into that. Let me present it so it's bigger and easier to see. Okay, so let's start over here on the left under laws of physics, the map of consciousness. So and these are all of our emotions, starting at shame, and because physicists have proven that we have energy bodies, they can now measure when our energy bodies vibrate at different frequencies and what that is. So our energy bodies communicate via emotions. So shame, it resonates at 20 hertz, vibrates at 20 hertz. Courage, 200 hertz. Love, 500 hertz. And enlightenment, which is an emotion, at 700 to 1,000 hertz. And I didn't know enlightenment was an emotion. I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies. Like, I've lived in China, lived in Chinese Buddhist monasteries, and no one ever taught me that. But it made so much sense now. It's an expression of the soul, and the souls express themselves via emotions. And I was about 20 pounds lighter when this happened in early 2024 and going to hot yoga 6 days a week. It lasted for 3 days. I sat in my chair for 3 days and vibrated super high. I lost 12 pounds. I was vibrating so high. Like, what the, right? But so what happens is when we spend all this time in shame, guilt, and fear, apathy, grief, then that's how we calibrate our nervous system. And that is a very low vibrating, kind of shut down, not expansive, not flowing. Like alive energy is flowing energy, like a stream that's alive, it's flowing and it's moving. You see in a dead stagnant pool, that's not alive energy, but what happens to our souls and our bodies? It becomes stagnant when we only could vibrate up to 100 hertz, maybe 150, maybe 175 hertz. That's nothing for the soul. So that's not healthy. And when we sit in all that fear, guilt, and shame, we just want to escape. And so addiction is our escape, our, short-term escape. So when we learn how to surf the waves of life, basically go into our emotional pain, transform it from wounds to wisdom, which my ebook teaches you how to do, my free ebook. Then we, come up the other side and go up our next hill and our kind of reason, love, joy. And then we kind of go down and then, but the deeper you go, the higher you fly. That's why I took on my soul planned a very traumatic childhood for me, because I had to go super deep. So I go super high into enlightenment, expanding my emotional range, And as a byproduct, helping every other soul in the collective expand their emotional range as well, because that's what happens during enlightenment. Dr. David R. Hawkins in The Map of Consciousness says that when you experience enlightenment, attractor energy fields that attractor energy fields open up that influence all of mankind. I mean, used to be, when someone experiences enlightenment, you want to know what they have to say. Well, that is the process. So the energy changes, and we open up all these attractor energy cells, and our hearts are a vortex, and our souls communicate out through our hearts to all other souls. So other souls, help us out, share the wisdom. So that is how the soul comes out through the heart. So let's go to the next slide and learn a little bit more about the heart. Okay, So the heart invites blood into motion, allowing coherent motion through rhythmic patterns of coordinated twists and releases. It does not pump. It's not external control over the blood. And we know this because fetuses take, a few weeks to develop the heart, and blood flows without the heart because blood moves in a spiral pattern, like it's natural and is nature. Nature will move in a spiral pattern. It provides more stability and flexibility than a straight line. Straight lines break. So blood flows like that, okay? So this twists and releases creates an energetic vortex. The electromagnetic field around our hearts is 5,000 times stronger than our brains. And the nervous system in our heart is far more complex than our brains. And our heart sends far more signals to our brains the other way around. Our hearts are in charge. So you have to recalibrate the heart to recalibrate your nervous system. And the heart is communicating from the soul. So the soul's got to be recalibrated. And that is the self-love that I teach in my free ebook. So blood naturally flows in a spiral, as it is the most energy efficient and turbulent reducing way to move matter. Okay, turbulent reducing, the most kind of smooth pattern. This movement pattern emphasizes the vortex created by the heart. And spiral systems adapt where linear systems break. They allow movement without rupture. And oscillating energy is alive energy. So I'm going to bring up this. We're going to watch it on Instagram. But I got to change out. I did that wrong. Sorry. Oh, shoot, I did that wrong. I'm sorry. Let me try it again. Okay, I did it wrong. I'm going to try it again, and then hopefully I'm going to get it right. Okay? So that didn't help me. Hang on. Okay, now I'm going to share, and now it's going to work. Okay, thanks for your patience. Okay, here we go.
Let me just read this because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions.
They want you to believe that you have an external locus of control. Okay? This mindset is what sets us up for the victimhood, to have an oppressor and oppressee. But because if we have internal authority, then that's a whole other system. Then external control mechanisms like nation states, religions, other external control mechanisms can't control you. And so they want to keep this knowledge from us. That's why this isn't taught in schools right now.
But it is false. It has always been false. And the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refuse to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance. The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge.
Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And he was right, with blood flow in the fetus. Wow.
The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you. It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system.
And that is healing from trauma. So I'll link this below, but I'm going to stop it there. That is the process to heal from trauma, is to recalibrate your nervous system to resonate with love, compassion, and enlightenment for self. And when you have love, compassion, and enlightenment in your heart, then that's what you project out in your soul. Then that's what you project out through your heart onto the quantum field. The universe is a mirror, showing you yourself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. That's the wisdom. Knowledge says we attract what we are through energetic resonance, meaning a vibrational match, because the universe is a mirror and we live in a holographic universe. Anyway, please check out my free ebook below to help you learn how to love yourself, because that's the solution. And self-love creates heaven on earth. And we co-create it together in our hearts, a frequency in our hearts emanated in our souls, emanated through our hearts onto the quantum field. So what we see when we see ourselves will be love, compassion, and enlightenment instead of fear, guilt, and shame. All right, I'm going to also link here my meditation and shamanic drumming video in case you'd like to use that to help you open your heart, learn to listen to your soul, what your soul can tell you, how to heal. Your soul's in charge. Okay. All right, please like and subscribe. Take care. Bye.